And here we are again at another one. This is I am at the one moment. South China Morning Post, and the article is China's Chinese economy shows further signs of slowing down ahead of Trump Xi showdown. And the 2 points are economic winter has come, says one analyst after November's figures show further signs of cooling activity. The PMI, which is the Purchasing Manager Index, suggests manufacturing sector was on the brink of contracting, which is being made smaller. On the eve of the high stakes meeting between US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping, new data showed that the Chinese economy slowed further in November, leaving the manufacturing sector on the brink of contraction. The official Composite Purchasing Managers Index (PMI), which measures sentiment among Chinese manufacturing and and sector firms, fell to 52.8% in November from 53.1% in October. The National Bureau of Statistics said the November level was the lowest since the composites began in January 2017. Manufacturing growth came to a halt in November, with the index falling at 50 from the 50.2 in October. And I'm sure that's from the year previous. The November index was exactly at the watershed point between expansion and contraction in the sector, and was the lowest since it came in at 49.9 in 2016. The decline was unexpected. The median forecast in a Bloomberg survey had predicted an unchanged reading of 50.2. Yu Fengwei, an adjunct professor of Huazhong University of Science and Technology, questioned whether the situation in the Chinese manufacturing sector might be worse than the data showed. I'm just wondering if the result of November PMI was rounded up to the 50 mark, he wrote in a blog post. We cannot deny the economic winter has already come. The data are here. Uh, Xi and Trump's make or break chance for a trade war ceasefire. Here we go. Activity among non manufacturing firms, mostly service sector companies, also showed, with the index falling to 53.4 from 53.9 the month before. The November index was the lowest since 50. The November index was the lowest since 53.1 in May 2016, and was lower than expected, with the Bloomberg survey forecast of a small drop of to 53.8. So it was supposed to go from 53.9 to 53.8. Combined with the weaker sentiment data in October, the November numbers suggest further slowing of Chinese growth in the fourth quarter from 6.5% posted in the third quarter. From the 6.5% posted in the third quarter. So they had less growth than that. Analysts expected growth to slow significantly in the first half of 2019, when the full impact of U.S. tariffs hit the Chinese economy. China's economic growth was likely to weaken further in the coming months, even if the meeting between Trump and Xi results in a trade ceasefire. Capital Capital Economics, a London-based consultancy, wrote in its latest notes. In response, China can be expected to implement further economic stimulus measures. In quotes here, just like some other stuff has been in quotes. My bad for not saying. We expect we expect more policy easing or stimulus to be launched once more signs of a significant slowdown emerge. Lu Ting, chief China economist at at Nomura at Nomura International, there we go, in Hong Kong, wrote in a research note. Every once in a while, that stutter will still get to me, y'all. Every once in a while. And China's new export orders will continue to contract as long as the trade war continues. Not to mention if trade tensions escalate after the meeting between President Xi and President Trump. Peng, Greater China Greater China economist at ING Bank um, said in a research note, the Chinese government might react by cutting import tariffs on goods to reduce the production costs in the manufacturing sector, she said. Um, the weaker economic figures were established the day before Xi and Trump were due to meet in Buenos Aires after the G20 leaders summit. Analysts generally agree that the leaders will not be able to fully resolve the trade war at their meeting, but they could agree to a ceasefire that postpones tariffs increases set to take effect on January 1st, while agreeing to further negotiations in the near term, perhaps based on an outline agreed at Saturday's meeting. Failure to make progress and a further increase in tariffs by the U.S. could risk a global recession, some analysts have warned. The result of the November PMI could affect China's negotiation strategy in the trade talks. Shen Jianguang, chief, chief economist at the JD Finance, told the South China Morning Post, the Chinese economy is already facing great downturn pressure. It is urgent to reach an agreement and to avoid further escalation of a trade war. The key now was whether China can speed up implementation of reform and opening of its economy, she added. The key now was whether China can speed up implementation of reform and opening of its economy, Shen added. There we go. The consensus is that China will sit down on Saturday in a weaker economic position. However, most analysts agree that neither side has much to gain from prolonging the conflict. China's in a much weaker position, but that does not mean that the U.S. is in a strong position, said Richard Duncan, an independent economist and publisher of the video newsletter Marco Watch, before the release of the November PMI data. So he said this before that stuff happened. Its economy could also be thrown into a very severe crisis through a prolonged war with China, is talking about the U.S., while China's economy could completely implode. It's the end of that article. What it's pretty much saying right now is that if these guys don't hash something out, the reality of all these economic downturns that people have been talking about. See, my personal opinion is that they started the trade war so that way they could justify the recession of the world, because the world was going into a recession anyway. But if you start this trade war and then you do this and you do that, if the situation worsens, they can always blame the trade war. Right on? It's trade war is why it's so bad. It's not because we fucked up and we mismanaged everything before this point. So, that's where I'm at. Just wanted to let y'all know. All right, I'm done.